Today we gathered to honour the life and legacy of John Robbins, a visionary who changed the way millions of people think about food, health and compassion. John Robbins was author of the groundbreaking book Diet for a New America, and he was more than just a best-selling writer. His decision to walk away from the Baskin-Robbins dairy ice cream empire in order to pursue a path of ethical and plant-based living inspired a movement that continues to grow.
The food environment is so toxic and confused. I mean, most people, when they think about what they're going to eat, there's three considerations: taste, convenience, and expense. If that's your tripod, if that's the three-legged stool on which you sit for your meals, McDonald's has got you.
The status quo is a fast track to suffering, disease, and death, as well as enormous harm. Most of us in right conscience do not want to be participants in a food system that is torturing animals by the billions, or that's destroying our planet.
We feel entitled to treat those animals with any manner of cruelty as long as it lowers the price per pound.
His words touched me so deeply, but so many tens of thousands of other people as well, and they will continue to do so for certainly many decades to come, I'm sure.
For all of you who are here now, whether you've been part of this movement for decades or this is our first time connecting, I can't thank you enough for your presence and for whatever ways you have been or will be part of the work to enhance the quality of life for all beings on this planet.
I'm honoured to be joined by Ocean Robbins, John's son, and by registered dietitian Brenda Davis, a founding board member of the Food Revolution Alliance, the non-profit established to carry on John Robbins' legacy. Ocean, how's the last couple of months been for you and family?
It's been all the things. I mean, it's been, of course, grief-stricken and painful, but also beautiful. I think that it's so clear to me that we only grieve things that have been precious. It's precisely because it was wonderful that we missed their loss. So I'm filled with so much gratitude. It's been a time of a lot of reflection on not only the luminary and leader my dad has been in the world, was in the world, and the ripples of his example and love and wisdom that continue to spread, but also the father that he was. And I don't always like to speak of him purely in the past tense, because I've also felt his spirit very present with me in ways that have been remarkable and quite profound. I've also been, there's this saying in the prophet, the deeper that sorrow has carved into the canyon of your heart, the more joy it can contain. And that's always been theoretically true for me, but since my father's transition, it's felt so tangible. Like, I literally have the experience that when I feel grief or loss or this sort of empty feeling in my heart, if I just allow that to be, it becomes space. It becomes almost a portal to the infinite, to a deeper compassion, a deeper love, a deeper wisdom, a deeper presence. And I'm realizing how deeply pain is part of life on earth. It's part of the human experience. And it seems to me now that when we have a friendly or accepting relationship to the inevitable pain that is in our lives, when we don't make it wrong or bad, but instead greet it with a sense of open-hearted acceptance and compassion, we create space for it to become sacred, for it to expand our capacity for love and for gratitude. Whereas when we tighten and fear pain, we tend to get smaller and more contracted, and our world gets smaller and we shrink. So it's so present for me that pain really can open us and deepen us and make us more capable of love.
Brenda, your fondest memories to John, what the emotion is going around for you the last couple of months?
Well, John, first of all, Ocean, thank you for those very wise and insightful words. I just feel them so deeply myself as well, and resonate with everything you said so strongly. John was for me the person I think I admired and respected more than anyone else in the world. He was a very dear friend and an incredible mentor, and I Sometimes I just feel his loss so deeply. It leaves such a hole in the heart. And yet, I know he, like Ocean said, he's still present. I shortly after he passed, we were having Zoom visits, and before before he transitioned, and I had a dream a few days after he passed. He came into my dream with an excited voice and said, "Brenda, I figured out how we can continue to visit. I can just visit you in your dreams." And then he started talking about books and people and all of these wonderful things. And it just felt so real to me that I just knew it was real. And so he just remains ever so present in my heart and in my life in that way. And I'm so grateful for that. I just can't even begin to tell you how grateful I am to have had him in my life in the way that he was. He was, he was the person I would often go to when challenges arose. And he was always so thoughtful. He was always so compassionate. He took the time. And I think about what he taught me in our last visits on Zoom. And I can remember him saying, that he was losing his bodily functions and capabilities, but at the same time, he was experiencing this kind of inner flowering. And he drew an analogy between, how, in nature, we experience everything so spiritually. And when a flower goes to seed, the roots dry out and die and the leaves wither and die. But then it's at the end of the flower's life that the rose smells the sweetest. And it's at the beginning and end of our days that we have sunrises and sunsets where the sky can at times become so spectacularly beautiful. And he said, that he's finding such love and purpose at that phase in his life. And it was so instructive to me. It gave me such a different perspective. And it didn't matter at what stage of John's life that I had the privilege of speaking to him. Every time I just learned so much. And it was like this expanding of my heart. And he admitted that physically it sucked, but yet there was this beauty around it. And he just shaped me so profoundly in so many ways. And being his friend was really one of the greatest privileges of my life. So I miss him terribly.
I would love to go to a clip from John now, if we don't mind, so the viewer can just watch at least one of my favorite moments from John.
When it comes to food and health, it's hard almost to imagine a society more askew than our own. The food environment is so toxic and confused. I mean, most people, when they think about what they're going to eat, there's three considerations: taste, convenience, and expense. And if that's your tripod, if that's the three-legged stool on which you sit for your meals, McDonald's has got you. Because their food is very tasty, it's very convenient, they're everywhere, you don't have to do anything, you just show up there. And they've made it relatively inexpensive. Of course, they do that by externalizing tremendous numbers of costs onto the environment, onto your health care, onto your weight, everywhere. It's not really cheap, but it seems so. It seems convenient. And yet what are there, if we ask, why are we eating anyway? Is it just to indulge this moment's convenience? Just to be a creature of habits that we picked up? We pick up habits all kinds of ways. So in fact, I just want to parenthetically ask you a question that's been on my mind. It's about reincarnation. Is it true? Or is that just some stupid idea I picked up in a past life?
So Ocean, in that clip, your father called our food environment toxic and confused. Do you, I'm presuming you agree with that assessment today. Did he always grow up with your father being so passionate about this topic? Because I suppose his book, Diet for a New America, came out when you were how old?
He started writing Diet for a New America when I was 10 years old, and it came out when I was 13 in 1987.
So it shaped a big part of your upbringing, seeing your father working on that message that took 3 years to write, but probably many more to think about before that.
Absolutely. Yes, I do believe that we live in a toxic food culture all around us. Junk food and factory farmed animal products are subsidized, they're normalized, they're advertised, they're mainstreamized. And in that environment, it can actually be an uphill battle just to eat basic, wholesome, healthy food. Um, so I think that, my dad was always kind of a rebel. And when I was a kid, um, we talked about food rather obsessively. My parents almost named me Kale way before Kale was cool. Thankfully, they took the more conservative route and chose Ocean instead. But we did eat a lot of kale and cabbage and carrots and other veggies from our garden. And, I learned about factory farms about the age of 7, and that's a pretty young to learn about something so horrible. But my dad wanted me to know because I was starting to interact with kids who were eating meat, and he didn't want me to be blind to the reality of where that came from. Because in a toxic food culture, you kind of need an immune system if you're going to interact with, and that immune system is knowledge, so you can make informed choices, because the status quo is a fast track to suffering, disease, and death, as well as enormous harm. Most of us in right conscience do not want to be participants in a food system that is torturing animals by the billions, and or that's destroying our planet, that's eroding topsoil and sucking our aquifers dry and chopping down tropical rainforests and destroying ecosystems and driving species to extinction. But that is what's happening in our food culture today. And so my dad wanted me to start to learn about these things early on. And I got to be a bit of a fundamentalist. He almost took it too far because I knew a lot and I got really passionate. And I actually one day was going through in second grade my fellow classmates' lunch boxes and interrogating them. I got in a fight with my best friend Damien over the fact that he had a roast beef sandwich. And I asked him if he believed in the death penalty for murder. And, by the end of our fight, I was in the principal's office and his roast beef sandwich was in the garbage. And, I got to think long and hard about the fact that I was advocating for compassion while I was getting in a fist fight with my best friend. And then my dad had some more conversations with me about what compassion means, and that it includes humans, not just animals, and that nobody changes because they're blamed or shamed. So we were having pretty serious, real conversations early, and he was such a mentor to me around this issue and this incredible complex issue that all vegans face of like, how do you hold true to your conscience and your values while recognizing that among those values is deep respect for other people's sovereignty, dignity, and right to make the best choices that make sense to them. And so, those were deeply ingrained in me. And I think Diet for New America, part of its success was that the formula for success was that it really spoke to a reader who was maybe cynical, but good intentioned. And it wasn't, he often said, you don't have to be a vegan or an animal rights person to want animals to be treated with respect, to want to be healthy, And so I think that by really opening that door wide and recognizing there's room for everybody to move in a plant-powered direction, right? That he helped to inspire so many more people than if he was just kind of dogmatic and fundamentalist. And that's part of his example to me as well.
Well, I came across John's book actually in 1989. And it was just not a coincidence how it came to me, because probably less than a month before it arrived on my desk, I was a public health nutritionist. I made a decision that I would no longer contribute to a food system that was built on pain, suffering, and death of living beings. And it was such a difficult decision for me because I was a dietitian teaching Canada's food guide for food groups, 2 of which were animal products. And I didn't even know how I could go on in my profession making this choice. And when I asked my husband if he would be willing to do this with me, we had 2 children at the time. They were 4 and 1. And I remember my husband saying, I would love to do that because I've always wanted to leave the softest footprint I could leave. And I was a big picture person, and I could see that all of the things that were really protective to human health were concentrated in plant foods as well. And I was just enthralled with, some of the work the World Health Organization was doing, and their diet, nutrition, and the prevention of chronic disease document in 1990 was just groundbreaking to me. And what was so shortly after that somebody walked into my office and put Diet for New America on my desk and said, "Is this a reliable resource?" And I knew there was one review of it in a newsletter, a dietitian's newsletter, that said, well, John Robbins doesn't have the authority to be speaking about nutrition, so we can't rely on this book. And I thought, well, that's a useless review. Could you leave the book with me so I can read it myself? And I read the book, and John articulated with such clarity and brilliance everything that I was feeling in my heart. It was like we were connected, like we were, soul siblings. And I fell in love with him immediately. And he was such a masterful storyteller. The book was well researched. It was so eloquently written. It was emotionally spellbinding. And I think that he was really the first person that wove all of that together. And sort of that indelible connection between what we eat, the well-being of animals, the survival of our planet, and our own health and humanity, in essence. And he helped us see that our food choices matter for ourselves and beyond ourselves. And it was a message that was one of urgency, but it was also one of hope. And so his words touched me so deeply, but so many tens of thousands of other people as well, and they will continue to do so for certainly many decades to come, I'm sure. So it was. I didn't know John. I didn't know that I would ever be able to see him in person and watch him speak, which I ended up doing many times, and then to become a dear friend was beyond my wildest dreams at that point. So the book was just was really important in my life.
I want to quickly go to a clip on Food Revolution Network's YouTube page called John Robbins Extending Our Circle of Compassion, where John described the realities of factory farming as a violation of the human-animal bond. Let's go to the clip.
Have you ever known a non-human animal and that relationship has enriched you as a human being? Yes. Given you something of yourself that you wouldn't have had otherwise? Taught you something, led you to something, evoked something for you, of you, that matters? That relationship really is a relationship with another being, another person who happens to be four-legged or has wings or whatever it is. A lot of us have had that. So as a society, though, here's the schizoid part. We call some animals pets, and we treat them that beautifully. We lavish our affection on them, and we get a lot in return. And then we call other animals livestock. And by virtue of that semantic distinction, we feel entitled to treat those animals with any manner of cruelty as long as it lowers the price per pound. Why? Some people say, well, the Bible says we have dominion, gives us dominion over other animals. I'm not a particularly a Bible person, but okay, I'll go there. What does dominion mean? Let's say I have 2 sons, and I go out for the evening. And when I do, I say to the older one, you're in charge while I'm gone. Take care of things. Take care of your brother. And I say to the younger one, until I get back, do what your brother says. Try not to make too much trouble. Have a good time, but don't make a mess. I am, in effect, am I not giving the older brother dominion over the younger one for the duration while I'm gone? That's dominion. Do I expect to come home later and find out that he's cooked and eaten the other one? Or done some macabre scientific experiment that involved tremendous cruelty to the younger one? I'd be pissed. Dominion is responsibility. It's accountability. And it asks us to extend our compassion, the circle of our compassion, wider, broader, to include the whole circle of life, the whole earth community. Each being that draws breath from the same source as we do, or provides oxygen because it's a plant, has an existence outside of, see, we tend to, it has value only insofar as we can convert it into revenue, exploit it. We become predators in that sense, economically, environmentally. And in factory farms today, oh my God, it's just, when I wrote Diet for America, I made that first part of the book, and I got a lot of criticism for it, but I wanted to do it because that's really my central feeling was, how can we, if you want, if a part of you hearkens to the prayer, let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me, does it make sense to fuel your body from the flesh and products of animals whose lives have been nightmares of suffering, who've lived and died in misery and frustration, with every one of their natural urges frustrated, all of their natural instincts violated? It's a violation of the human-animal bond. And you don't have to be a vegetarian, you don't have to be an animal rights activist to be appalled by it if you see it because it's so severe. But you have to see it, you have to lift the veil, and the industry does not want that to happen. They do a lot to keep that veil in place, to keep people from knowing what's really going on.
So I've got a huge amount of respect for anybody promoting veganism or plant-based or animal rights before 2005. Not because 2005 was necessarily the pivotal year for me, but because 2005 represented the release of the China Study, which was another book that was very important for my journey, and also the animal rights documentary Earthlings. They both came out in 2005. Ocean, your father was promoting this decades before that. Can you just give a sense of what the plant-based or the animal rights movement or community or whatever you want to call it, there's so many areas to intersect with that message, what it was like in the 90s?
Well, thanks for asking. There was actually a pretty strong wave that started around the same time as Diet for New America was released. Beef consumption in the United States between 1987, when the book came out, and about 5 years later, 92, dropped by almost 20% in the United States. And Diet for New America was part of that, and it also rode the wave of that. And a lot of it was tied to animal rights as well as health considerations. Environmental issues were not at the forefront yet. People were concerned about the environment, but they didn't think it was connected to food. None of the major environmental groups in the US mentioned food. They actually were afraid it would alienate their membership, so they didn't talk about it at that time. But and health was, the link between food and health was starting to come out more and more popularly. The animal issue, interestingly, was not like my dad's book Diet for New America has 3 parts. Part 1 is about animals, part 2 is about health, and part 3 is about the planet. And his publisher didn't want part 1 to be about animals. They said, that's not what will interest people. You should lead off with health. And he said, no, I'm going to lead with animals because I want to open people's hearts. And remarkably, the book did that. It was very much against the conventional wisdom, which said and still says that people are motivated by self-interest, right? But he made the case that our self-interest includes our capacity for love. Like, we feel more love, and that is part of our wholeness as humans. And he made that case strongly to the publisher and ultimately to his audience, and it was profoundly impactful. So treatment of animals in factory farms became a big issue, and then you started seeing, first the industry trying to greenwash it, so to speak, by putting more packages with like happy animals on their packages and trying to imply that the animals were treated well. There was a whole California dairy industry campaign where they showed cows grazing in fields with billboards and slogans like "so much grass, so little time." Turns out the image taken was actually filmed in New Zealand, not in California, for the California dairy industry's campaigns. Reason being that California's dairy is primarily focused in the Central Valley, where it's hot and dry, and the cows are living in feedlots and may never see a blade of grass in their entire lives. My dad actually joined with People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals in the 90s to sue the Dairy Board of California over their misleading advertising campaigns, and that generated some significant publicity as well. My dad actually wrote the foreword to the China study when it came out in 2005, and it was part of a whole new wave of the health side of the plant-based movement, gaining a lot more institutional credibility. So now we have organizations like the American Institute for Cancer Research, the American College of Cardiology, the American Heart Association, and many others all advocating and supporting a plant-based direction for dietary patterns. But it's been a long road, to get there. And I really honor all of the early trailblazers who stepped out way before it was popular, back when it was seriously rebellious to challenge the meat-centered dietary pattern that was thought to be best for Americans. Now, today we have a whole other dynamic, which is that we've got violent opposition and backlash, and even a lot of folks who are acting as if, because mainstream organizations are now recommending more plant-based diets, that's become the status quo. They're acting as if that's the norm, and they are the rebels to say, no, we need meat, right? But in reality, it's never become the status quo of dietary patterns. It's just become recognized overwhelmingly by serious scientists today and researchers that a plant-based dietary pattern is optimal for human health and for planetary health, and obviously for the well-being of animals. So now we have lots of confusion in the conversation about food, but I think serious researchers are not confused.
Ocean, your dad stepped away from one of the biggest dairy empires. So sorry to interject, but just if you could just very, very briefly, I know many people watching this will be familiar, but yeah.
My grandpa founded an ice cream company with his brother-in-law. It was called Baskin-Robbins. And my dad was groomed to one day join in running the family business. He had an ice cream cone-shaped swimming pool in the backyard, named his cats after ice cream flavors, helped invent ice cream flavors, and was groomed early on to be a part of it. But then when he was in his early 20s, he was offered that chance. My grandpa's brother-in-law and business partner, Bert Baskin, was dying of heart disease. And he asked my dad, would you take his place when he passes and join me in running this business? And my dad said no. And he walked away from a company that is now valued at over $7 billion to follow his own rocky road, and left any access to the family wealth, moved with my mom to a little island off the coast of Canada where they built a one-room log cabin and grew most of their own food and practiced yoga and meditation for several hours a day and lived as vegans. And so I was born in that cabin. And then years later, of course, my dad wrote Diet for a New America, which came out in 1987 and became a runaway bestseller. And the media came to call him the rebel without a cone. But I think that the fact that he had chosen to walk away from Baskin-Robbins became a compelling part of the story arc. And he didn't want to talk about it at first. It wasn't in the book at all. He wanted to be his own person. He'd always been his own person. But one of the publishers he spoke with said, people will want to know about this. So he ended up saying a few sentences about it in the introduction to the book, and it wound up becoming a huge part of the media hook. And I think it showed the integrity that this man had. That some things are more important in life than money. And at one point he was on national public radio, and a National Cattlemen's Beef Association representative said, well, you're just trying to sell your book. And my dad said, sir, with all due respect, if my goal in life was to make money, I never would have left Baskin-Robbins. And there was a live audience for this event, and they all started cheering,
What a
because
line.
they could
Wow.
feel the integrity of that. And, the National Cattlemen's Beef Association guy said, oh, well, you got me there. Like, he recognized he had no comeback, because here he was literally being paid by the industry to represent them, right? And my dad's here promoting a message that is deeply heartfelt. So I think that that touched people, and in this consumeristic society where we have come to make money more important than integrity, more important than compassion, sometimes in some ways more important than life itself, to recognize a life lived with integrity and values, where some things are truly more important than the so-called almighty dollar, I think is of profound spiritual significance to us today. And I would argue that we clearly don't take money with us when we die. We may leave it behind, but we definitely don't take it with us. But I do think that we maybe take something of love with us. And whatever your belief is about the afterlife or non-afterlife, to me, it's clear that that the love we give and the impact we have matters. And that is more important than the accumulation of wealth in a bank account. And my dad always lived by those principles and helped to inspire me with them, and inspire a lot of other people. And, if it's cheaper to raise animals in factory farms and we can get meat for a little less, cents per pound, even if it's more loaded with saturated fat and more toxic and pumped full of antibiotics and hormones and pesticides, does that make it right? Does that make it ethical? Does that make it healthy for our souls, much less our bodies? And he said no. And I think a lot of people have come to agree with him.
What was he most proud of?
Well, this might sound a bit self-serving, but I know what his answer would have been. So it just kind of makes me cry, because he would always say he was most proud of me,
Wow.
And that's something about the special bond that we had. On his desk, he had a row of pictures, 12 pictures, of him and I. The first one on the far left is me as a baby and him holding me. The last one on the far right, taken just a few months ago, is him at a point where he was really unable to walk, and I'm holding him. And and then there's a journey of our life together, and we're embracing in all 12 pictures. And he had that on his desk. So every time I visit my mom now and enter that room, I see that row of pictures, and I remember how much my dad loved me. And in my lifetime, my family moved about 4 or 5 times, and every move was for me. I was born in the one-room log cabin. We moved off of that island where my parents were so happy because they wanted me to have friends to play with and a school to go to. And then we moved to California because they wanted to have more culture and for me, and more sunshine for them. But also we chose Santa Cruz, California, because there was a school there that they loved. And they said, wherever there's a good school for Ocean, we'll find a good community for us. And then we moved a little bit later because our home was a 3-bedroom and I was married and my wife and I needed a little bit of space. And then yet again, we moved when we needed space to have twins and have space for our twins to thrive. And so, like, every step of the way, my parents chose to center their lives around what was best for their son and his family. And, I just felt the love all the way through. And, there are a lot of people who are big activists who neglect their families. Elon Musk recently said, to paraphrase him, speaking to a bunch of business school graduates, he said, here's a secret in business. You'll be more than twice as likely to succeed if you work 80 hours a week than if you work 40. And of course it's true. But I don't think that's to succeed in business, but not necessarily to succeed as a parent or as a partner to your spouse, or as a human who wants to be emotionally well-developed. So I think we have to look at success from all of those lenses. And, in the civil rights struggle, there's a concept, they call them the orphans of the movement, the children who grew up to parents who were activists. in the 60s on the front lines in the bus boycotts and the marches and the sit-ins while their children were neglected at home. And, my dad never wanted me to be an orphan of the movement. And I wasn't. I felt deeply loved and cared about throughout my life. And I've tried to bring those same values to my parenting and to my family. And sometimes it means making difficult choices about where we use our time and energy, but we have to put our own sanity first. And especially in a toxic food culture, in a society where so many patterns are normalized, we have to take the time and space to re-examine our choices and our values and how we can live by them every day. And that the rubber meets the road in the home. That's where patterns are formed. That's where relationships are formed. And what we practice in private, we tend to manifest in public. And so in my dad's speeches, in my dad's media appearances, in my dad's books, what he wrote, what he delivered, what he said was an expression of the essence of his spirit. He didn't always live by those values at every moment. He had moments of being cranky and stressed and doing harm. But he always tried to make amends for that and to learn from it and to be better. And I just respect that so much.
Brenda, you've collaborated with so many people in the plant-based lifestyle medicine space. What was unique about John's message or his way of communicating it?
Well, I think what was really unique was that it all came from the heart, and that he had this incredible ability to touch people and to move people. And he did so because I think for him it was an ethical imperative. I think he just touched so many lives. He ignited a movement. He set a bar for humanity that justified any of those costs to him. And for me, he was the person that I think I loved listening to the most, because he was such a masterful, gifted storyteller. And he really radiated conviction and grace. And, I can remember the first time I ever heard him speak. It was about 1991, I believe. And for me, it was more exciting than seeing a rock star. It was the first time I met him, and I didn't ever imagine that we would become such close friends. But in 2010, and this is 20 years later, I had the privilege of introducing him at a talk he gave in Seattle. And I can remember we sat together at the front of the room, and somebody brought him a bowl of vegan ice cream. And we shared the ice cream before the introduction. And it's just such a beautiful memory I have. But I did look up that introduction, and I would love to read it to you, just as a sort of my feelings about John. And this is just part of the introduction, but many of us in this room have been deeply personally impacted by John's extraordinary life story, his writings, and his teaching. John has inspired a powerful vision of ethics that is at the very foundation of the vegan movement. John's life has been dedicated to transforming this planet into a place of goodness and peace, a place where life is supported and cherished, where kindness and compassion are the fabric of our hearts, and love and understanding are rooted in our souls. It has been about creating a place that is free of violence, intolerance, and indifference, and where purposeful harm to living, feeling beings is unthinkable. While many of us have embraced this vision, few have done more to turn these thoughts into actions and bring us closer to this reality. John doesn't just write about such things. He doesn't just teach about such things. He lives them, he breathes them, and he radiates them. Every time I listen to John, my hope for humanity is restored.
Thank you so much for doing this video. Both. I want to end with the tri-beat video that was put together. But before that, I wondered if, firstly, Brenda, if you had any kind of closing remarks.
Well, I guess my big hope is that the next generation just carries forward John's, vision of a world that's guided by compassion, integrity, and reverence for life, which is just so critical. I think John really showed us that courage and consciousness can change the course of history, and that living in alignment with our values is probably the most powerful thing that any of us can do. It still boggles my mind that he was able to do that himself, considering where he came from. And his work was a beacon of light, and I think it's up to all of us just to help keep that light shining forever. And I think there are so many dedicated individuals that are doing incredible work, and I know John is so grateful for that.
If you've been touched by my dad's life and work, whether you've just learned about him today or you've been a fan for decades, whether you've read his books or watched his videos or not, I hope that you recognize that now the torch really is in your hands, in all of our hands. He's not on earth anymore in a body, but the light he brought, the love he brought, lives on in all of us and through us. And there are a couple of specific projects that I want to make sure viewers are aware of. So one of my dad's big passions was helping to pass that torch and inspire a new generation of leadership. And so one of the products we launched with Food Revolution Network is the Plant-Based Coaching Certificate, which is training more than 200 coaches every year to become ambassadors and leaders in the food revolution movement. And Brenda is part of our core faculty, as are many other brilliant people. And it is such a privilege to work with courageous, dedicated, committed people who want to carry this work forward and in some cases launch careers, helping other people get healthy and eat more plant-based diets. So if you're interested in that, please go to certificate.foodrevolution.org. Again, that's certificate.foodrevolution.org. And also we launched a nonprofit organization to help carry on my dad's legacy. So for those who want to invest in carrying this work forward, particularly focusing on advancing the food revolution movement in historically marginalized and low-income communities, please consider making a contribution at foodrevolutionalliance.org. Brenda and I are part of the founding board for that organization, along with my mom and a couple of other folks. And again, that is foodrevolutionalliance.org. And lastly, I just want to say thank you for everybody watching, for your time, your attention, your care. If anything you've heard today has touched your heart, then bless you and thank you for having a heart and a mind that are open to be touched. And thank you for all the ways that you bring more love, more compassion, more integrity into this hurting, precious, and beautiful world we all share.
I was born in 1947 in Glendale, California, into a fairly normal American family. But that soon changed when my father, Irv Robbins, founded one of the biggest companies in American history, Baskin-Robbins, 31 flavors. The company grew and grew. We moved to North Hollywood, and my dad became enamored of power and money and success. And he became friends with some very powerful people, including Richard Nixon, who came to our house often. There was an ice cream cone swimming pool in our backyard. There were days I ate ice cream for breakfast. I worked with my dad and was groomed to succeed him one day and then eventually take over the company. But as I was becoming older and my own values were beginning to emerge, I was growing apart from my dad. Nixon was propagating the war in Vietnam, and I was subject to the draft.
In what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation,
I decided to go to the South to try to work with Dr. King. My dad doesn't like Dr. King at all. He's got some really nasty things to say about him. And when I was 21, I decided to walk away from it all, to walk away from Baskin-Robbins, $1 billion inheritance, and any trust funds or money. He thought I was insane, and he got very angry. I felt the wall. There was often a wall there, but it got huge at that moment. And we didn't talk for several years after that. And moved with my wife to a little log cabin that we built in the woods where we lived very simply for the next 10 years. I wrote a book. I sent my dad a copy, but we were pretty estranged at the time, and I phoned him. And the first thing I said was, Dad, I've got some good news. And his answer was, what could be good news coming from you? And I said, well, I've published a book. He replied he would not look at it. My dad continued to eat the way he had always eaten. By the time my dad was in his 60s, his health was deteriorating pretty badly. He had heart disease, he had diabetes, and the prognosis was that he could be facing the amputation of a foot or even a leg, that he could go blind. And one day, the cardiologist takes my book and hands it to him and said, I think you should read this book. Not knowing that this is his son's book. My dad knew, but he didn't tell him. What happened next took me, my father, and the world by surprise. My name is John Robbins, and this is my story.